Visiting Meadowbrook Senior Living had become a ritual for me, a quiet anchor in what often felt like a whirlwind of a week. My grandmother, Eleanor, had settled in there a few years back, and I'd grown accustomed to the hushed corridors, the faint scent of lemon polish and elderly wisdom, and the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment from somewhere far down the hall. I'm Olivia, by the way, 24 years old, and someone who generally prefers the predictable hum of routine. Most days, I'd find Eleanor in the sunroom, engrossed in a crossword puzzle, and I'd settle into a plush armchair with a book, content in our shared, comfortable silence. It was a haven, a place where the world outside seemed to quiet its insistent demands. One Tuesday afternoon, the air felt a little different. I'd just stepped off the elevator, a well-worn copy of a historical fiction novel tucked under my arm, when a burst of laughter, bright and unrestrained, echoed from the sunroom. My brow furrowed, a tiny, almost imperceptible reaction. The sunroom was usually a sanctuary of soft murmurs and gentle smiles, not boisterous exclamations. Pushing through the double doors, I spotted her immediately. She was a woman around my age, standing by the large bay window, her back mostly to me. But even from that angle, her presence was undeniable. A cascade of fiery red curls, a shade somewhere between sunset and ember, bounced around her shoulders as she gestured animatedly, speaking to a group of residents who were, uncharacteristically, roaring with delight. When she turned slightly, I caught a glimpse of striking amber eyes, full of light and laughter. She had a kind of effortless energy about her, a vividness that seemed to suck all the muted tones out of the room and replace them with her own vibrant palette. She wore a bright floral dress that day, a stark contrast to my own subdued navy cardigan and slacks. My grandmother, bless her heart, was one of the loudest laughers in the group, her hand pressed to her chest. I offered Eleanor a small wave, then carefully navigated a path around a chessboard and a forgotten walker to an empty chair near the window, a little farther from the epicenter of the commotion. I pulled out my book, hoping to sink into its pages and let the unfamiliar exuberance fade into the background. It seemed fate had other plans. A few minutes later, the woman with the red hair moved towards a small, vacant table right next to my chosen armchair. I noticed she had a rather large canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder, overflowing with what looked like craft supplies, yarn, glitter, colorful papers. She set the bag down with a thud that resonated through the quiet air, a sound disproportionately loud in the usually serene space. Then, she pulled out a chair, scraping it loudly against the polished floor, and began to spread out her supplies. My concentration, which was never really fully present, completely dissolved. I glanced up, just a quick flicker of my eyes. She was humming now, a cheerful, off-key tune, as she meticulously arranged tiny beads and spools of thread. Her movements were expansive, her elbows occasionally brushing dangerously close to the edge of my armrest. It wasn't malicious, just oblivious. I cleared my throat, a subtle, almost silent protest. She didn't seem to notice. Deciding on a slightly more direct approach, I gave a gentle, almost imperceptible shift in my chair, trying to create a little more personal space. That's when it happened. Her arm, in a sweeping motion as she reached for a tube of glue, knocked against the corner of my book. It slid from my lap, landing with a soft thump on the carpet. "Oh, goodness," she exclaimed, her voice a warm contralto, but still loud enough to make me wince slightly. She immediately bent down, her fiery curls brushing the floor, to retrieve my book. "I am so sorry. Are you all right? I'm such a klutz." She straightened up, holding my book out to me, her amber eyes wide with genuine contrition. Up close, I could see tiny flecks of gold in them. Her face was open, expressive, completely unlike my own carefully composed features. For a moment, words eluded me. I just stared at her, taking in her vibrant presence, the way her energy seemed to fill the space between us. "It's fine," I managed, my voice a little stiffer than I intended. I took the book from her, feeling the faint warmth of her fingers linger on the cover for a fleeting second. She winced, a small, endearing gesture. Still, my fault entirely. I get a little carried away, with all the crafting. She gestured vaguely at her spread of supplies, then back at the laughing residents, as if to explain the whirlwind of her personality. I'm Aurora, by the way. Olivia, I replied, my gaze dropping to my book, though my mind was still very much on her. I found myself scrutinizing the way she carried herself, the unreserved brightness. It was so different from my own quiet existence, my carefully constructed world of measured interactions. Part of me, the part that craved order, felt a slight prickle of annoyance at her intrusion into my peaceful routine. Yet another, smaller part, a curious flicker, found itself wondering about the boundless enthusiasm that emanated from her. She truly was like a burst of sunlight in these quiet halls, and I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to bask in it or retreat to the shadows. The encounter in the sunroom left a peculiar impression on me. I spent the remainder of that visit, and even a good portion of the drive home, replaying Aurora's apologies, her wide, expressive eyes, and the sheer audacity of her vibrant presence. I was accustomed to things being orderly, predictable. Aurora, with her cascading red hair and her propensity for accidental book-knocking, was anything but. Yet a small, persistent voice in my head kept reminding me that her apology had been genuine, her concern entirely sincere. It nagged at me, that feeling of having been perhaps a little too stiff, a little too reserved. A few days later, on my next visit to Meadowbrook, I found myself consciously avoiding the sunroom initially. I opted instead for a stroll through the small, impeccably maintained garden courtyard, a place where the murmur of fountains usually offered a soothing backdrop. But even there, my thoughts kept drifting back to the woman with the amber eyes. When I finally made my way inside, drawn by the familiar strains of Eleanor's favorite classical music echoing from the common area, I saw her again. Aurora was by the grand piano, her head tilted as she spoke animatedly to one of the residents. Her outfit today was just as vivid, a mustard yellow cardigan over a patterned blouse, a splash of color against the muted hallway. As she turned, her gaze met mine across the room. For a split second, I considered pretending I hadn't seen her, but that felt childish, even for me. She offered a hesitant smile, then, taking a deep breath, walked towards me. My heart gave a tiny, involuntary lurch. Olivia, right? She asked, her warm contralto voice a little softer than I remembered from our previous, slightly chaotic interaction. Listen, about the other day. I really am sorry. I tend to just exist very loudly, I guess. I hope I didn't ruin your book or your day. She gave a sheepish grin, a charming crinkle appearing at the corners of her eyes. The book is fine, Aurora, I replied, my voice, thankfully, sounding more natural this time. And my day wasn't ruined. I paused, then added, it was an unexpected moment. It was as close to an admission of lingering curiosity as I was willing to get. She chuckled, a light, melodic sound. Unexpected is probably a good word for me, generally. Then, her amber eyes flickered past me, towards a gathering of residents around a bingo table. Oh, there's Martha. That's my grandmother. She always tries to bribe the caller for extra numbers. I followed her gaze. And there, seated right next to a woman with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, was Eleanor, my grandmother, holding her bingo card with a look of intense concentration. That's Eleanor, my grandmother, I said, a faint smile touching my lips. She's probably giving Martha pointers on how to cheat. Aurora's eyes widened in surprise, then she burst into a soft laugh. No way. Our grandmas are bingo buddies? That's hilarious. She glanced back at me, a new warmth in her expression, an unspoken connection forged over our grandmother's shared antics. Well, this changes things. I guess we're destined to cross paths, huh? It appears so, I agreed, a genuine smile now gracing my face. It was a strange twist of fate, one that seemed to gently, but firmly, push us together. We walked over to the bingo table, the shared observation of our grandmothers offering a natural bridge for conversation. Martha, Aurora's grandmother, was indeed trying to subtly adjust her bingo card, much to Eleanor's amused disapproval. "Martha, you scamp," Eleanor declared, nudging her friend playfully. "Don't listen to her, dear," she said to Aurora and me, then winked. "She's a bad influence." We spent the next half-hour watching them, exchanging quiet remarks about their competitive spirits. Aurora told me how Martha used to teach art classes, her hands still surprisingly steady despite her age, and how she loved to listen to jazz music. I, in turn, shared Eleanor's fondness for classic mysteries and her surprisingly sharp wit. As the bingo game wound down, a comfortable silence settled between Aurora and me. The initial awkwardness had dissipated, replaced by a nascent ease. I found myself observing Aurora more closely, noticing the way her eyes crinkled when she genuinely smiled, the thoughtful tilt of her head when she listened. There was a kindness in her, a quiet attentiveness that belied her initial boisterousness. This was more than just polite conversation. It felt like the careful unfolding of something new, something that held the promise of an unexpected, yet welcome, connection. The truce had been struck, and from the ashes of a spilled book, a tentative friendship was beginning to bloom. The weeks that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. My visits to Meadowbrook began to feel less like a chore and more like a gentle expectation. It wasn't just about Eleanor anymore, though her beaming face remained my primary reason. Now, there was an unspoken anticipation, a subtle shifting of my schedule to align with when I might, accidentally on purpose, cross paths with Aurora. We'd fallen into a pattern. After checking in with our grandmothers, who seemed to revel in our shared presence, Aurora and I would often find ourselves gravitating towards a quiet corner of the common room, or perhaps out onto the patio when the weather was clement. We'd talk about the trivial, the profound, and everything in between. The initial veneer of politeness had worn thin, revealing glimpses of the complex individuals beneath. I, ever the meticulous observer, began to piece together the nuanced landscape of Aurora's personality. Her vibrant exterior, I discovered, was layered over a thoughtful, sometimes even pensive, soul. I noticed the way her smile, usually so open and bright, would sometimes falter for a fleeting second when a distant memory surfaced in her amber eyes, a subtle clouding that hinted at unspoken stories. Or the almost imperceptible tensing of her shoulders when a conversation veered towards family expectations or past disappointments. She was expressive, yes, but her expressions held depth, a silent language I found myself increasingly fascinated by. Aurora, in turn, possessed an uncanny ability to draw me out. She didn't press or pry, but her gentle inquiries, framed with genuine curiosity, would often coax responses from me that few others managed to elicit. "What do you really think about that, Olivia?" she'd ask, her gaze unwavering, encouraging me to articulate opinions I usually kept to myself. I found myself sharing insights on the intricate plots of my favorite novels, or my quiet observations about human nature, subjects I rarely discussed outside my own head. It was liberating, this slow, deliberate peeling back of my own carefully constructed layers. One afternoon, we were sitting in the sunroom, the late autumn light filtering through the large windows, painting the room in shades of soft gold. Eleanor and Martha were engrossed in a game of checkers, their concentration fierce. Aurora was recounting a particularly amusing incident from her childhood, involving a rogue kitten and a very upset neighbor. Her hands gestured animatedly as she spoke, and her infectious laughter filled the space, a sound that, by now, no longer jarred me, but instead resonated with a warm familiarity. She reached the punchline, her face alight with mirth, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a deep, genuine laugh bubble up from within me. It wasn't my usual polite chuckle. It was a full, unrestrained sound that surprised even myself. My shoulders shook with it, and I had to press a hand to my mouth to stifle it. Aurora's laughter softened, her amber eyes sparkling as she watched me, a soft, appreciative smile playing on her lips. A comfortable silence settled between us then, punctuated only by the soft thud of a checker piece landing on the board from our grandmother's game, and the gentle rustling of leaves outside the window. The air, usually so neutral in the common room, felt charged, imbued with a quiet intimacy that was both novel and compelling. As my laughter subsided, I found my gaze drifting towards the window, watching a solitary cardinal flit across the autumn trees. When I subtly shifted my eyes back towards Aurora, I caught her gaze. She wasn't looking at the cardinal, or at the checker game, or even really at me. Her eyes were fixed on my face, a soft, almost contemplative expression there. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a lingering moment, a silent question in her amber depths that seemed to stretch the fabric of our nascent friendship. It was a gaze that held a warmth, a tenderness, that stirred something new and unfamiliar deep within me, a quiet shift in the carefully ordered landscape of my heart. The lingering gaze in the sunroom had been a subtle turning point, a silent acknowledgement of something shifting between us. Our interactions at Meadowbrook grew even more anticipated, but soon, the confines of the senior living facility felt too restrictive for the burgeoning connection. It started with casual suggestions. There's a new coffee shop downtown with amazing oat milk lattes. Want to check it out sometime? Or I heard that indie bookstore got a rare first edition you might like if you're ever free. These invitations, initially hesitant, soon became natural extensions of our visits, propelling our conversations beyond the quiet halls. Our first few outings were precisely what I'd categorize as friend dates. Coffee at that new cafe, followed by a long, meandering walk through the local park, discussing everything from obscure literature to the finer points of urban planning. I found myself drawn to Aurora's expressive gestures, the way her hands moved with her thoughts, emphasizing a point or punctuating a joke. Her eyes, those captivating amber pools, would light up with genuine enthusiasm when she spoke about her passions, her volunteer work with animal shelters, her dream of opening a small pottery studio, or her fervent opinions on classic rock albums. She had a way of making even the most mundane topics interesting, infusing them with her own unique brand of vivacity. But beneath the surface of these pleasant outings, an undeniable pull began to hum. It was a subtle connection, a warmth that wasn't unwelcome, but rather intriguing. I, ever the careful observer, started to consciously, almost imperceptibly, orchestrate moments of closeness. It wasn't overt. It was an invitation to a deeper emotional intimacy, a subtle test of the boundaries between us. During an art gallery visit, I suggested we share a single pair of headphones to listen to the audio guide for a particular exhibit. Our shoulders brushed, a brief, fleeting contact that sent a strange warmth through me. I noticed her slight intake of breath, the almost imperceptible tensing of her posture. Later, while looking at a particularly abstract painting, I leaned in slightly to whisper a comment, my voice low, my proximity intentional. I saw the faint flush rise in her cheeks, the way her eyes, when they met mine, held a heightened awareness. I found myself analyzing Aurora's every reaction. A brief mirroring of my gesture, a softened tone in her voice, a gaze that held mine a fraction of a second longer than strictly necessary. These tiny tells, invisible to anyone else, spoke volumes to me. It was a delicate dance, a push and pull of unspoken emotions. Aurora, at times, would share a vulnerable thought, a fragment of her past, only to retract slightly, as if testing the waters. Sometimes, I worry I'm too much, she confessed one afternoon, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her coffee cup. The vulnerability was raw, and my heart ached with an unexpected protectiveness. But then, almost immediately, she'd deflect with a joke, a swift change of topic, leaving me to wonder about the boundaries she was navigating and the ones I was subtly trying to erode. I wasn't a demonstrative person by nature, but with Aurora, I felt a burgeoning desire to bridge the gap between us, to lessen the emotional distance. My efforts weren't about grand gestures. It was about the slow, deliberate cultivation of trust and intimacy, about creating a space where the unspoken became more potent than anything said aloud. It was in the sustained eye contact across a crowded room, the shared smiles that held deeper meaning, the quiet understanding that blossomed in our silences. I was playing a long game, a careful strategist mapping out a path towards a connection I was beginning to realize I deeply craved, a connection that felt destined to transcend the comfortable confines of mere friendship. The subtle dance of proximity and vulnerability continued, each step bringing us closer, revealing more intricate layers of who we were. One particularly dreary, rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky presses down with an almost physical weight, Aurora and I found ourselves seeking refuge from the sudden downpour. We had been walking near the university campus, intending to grab some hot tea, when the heavens opened up. We ducked into a small, independent bookstore, its storefront glowing like a warm invitation. The air inside was a comforting mix of old paper, brewing coffee, and the faint, sweet scent of damp wool from other patrons' coats. We wandered through the narrow aisles, occasionally brushing shoulders as we navigated past towering shelves crammed with books. The quiet murmur of pages turning and soft conversations created a soothing backdrop. It was in the history section, tucked away amongst ancient tomes, that Aurora paused, her fingers tracing the spine of a worn paperback. Her usual effervescence had dimmed slightly, replaced by a contemplative quietness. "You know," she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper against the gentle rain pattering on the skylight above us, "sometimes I wonder if I'll ever really get it right." She didn't look at me, her gaze still fixed on the book. I waited, offering a silent space for her to continue. I had learned that Aurora, despite her outward brightness, carried a thoughtful introspection and sometimes a quiet melancholy. She sighed, a fragile sound. "There was someone before. A few years ago. It didn't end well. I think I gave too much, or maybe not enough of the right things. I'm still not entirely sure." She finally turned to me, her amber eyes holding a flicker of pain, a vulnerability she rarely allowed to surface. "It left a mark, you know? Made me a little wary of letting people in too close. Of trusting that my messy, loud self could be enough." My heart, which had been steadily beating, seemed to clench with an unexpected ache of empathy. I saw the weariness in her eyes, a shadow that the brightest of her smiles couldn't entirely conceal. This was a side of Aurora I hadn't fully glimpsed before, the echoes of past hurt, the lingering fear of pain. I reached out, my hand hovering for a moment, then gently placed it on her arm. It was a simple, comforting gesture, a silent acknowledgement of her pain. I didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. Instead, I just listened, my steady presence an anchor in the quiet, comforting space of the bookstore. "It takes courage to open up again," I said, my voice low, hoping to convey the depth of my understanding. "And it takes even more to acknowledge where the past has left its impact." I paused, then found myself, unexpectedly, sharing a fragment of my own guarded anxieties. I've always been afraid of showing too much, of being too much. It feels safer to keep things contained, to protect myself from the vulnerability of true connection. It was an admission, raw and unpolished, a piece of myself I rarely offered. Aurora's eyes met mine, and in their depths, I saw not just empathy, but recognition. A shared understanding passed between us, a profound moment of emotional intimacy that transcended words. The air around us, usually filled with the scent of old paper, now felt thick with unspoken emotions, with the weight of shared vulnerabilities. It was a revelation. Her confession wasn't just about her past. It was about the present, about the careful, hesitant steps she was taking with me. And my own admission, though unplanned, solidified something within me. This connection with Aurora wasn't just a fascinating distraction or a burgeoning friendship. It was something deeper, a yearning for true emotional resonance, for the kind of understanding that allowed two souls to witness each other's hidden wounds and still choose to stay. We stood there for a long moment, the quiet rain outside mirroring the gentle unfolding of our hearts, both exposed and undeniably, irrevocably closer. After that afternoon in the bookstore, the emotional connection between us became almost palpable, a delicate thread woven through every interaction. Every shared glance, every extended conversation, Every near touch was charged with an unspoken meaning that vibrated just beneath the surface. I found myself dissecting Aurora's every word, every gesture, searching for confirmation of the burgeoning feelings that now resided in the core of my being. It was a fascinating, terrifying process, navigating the intricate map of her expressions, looking for signs that mirrored the fierce tenderness growing within me. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for the dramatic. One clear evening, after another pleasant dinner, Aurora suggested we drive up to a quiet hillside on the outskirts of the city. "There's a spot," she'd said, her amber eyes sparkling, "where you can see all the city lights like scattered jewels and the stars just pop." It was an invitation I couldn't refuse. We parked the car, and the crisp night air enveloped us as we walked a short distance to the crest of the hill. Below us, the city sprawled, a shimmering tapestry of light against the inky blackness. Above, the sky was a velvet canvas, dusted with countless stars, each one a tiny, distant promise. The vast expanse seemed to amplify the unspoken feelings that now pulsed between us, making the silence feel heavy, profound. We stood shoulder to shoulder, gazing out at the panorama, the silence stretching, not awkward, but expectant. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the subtle shift of her weight as she leaned slightly in my direction. My heart hammered a rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. It was now or never. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I turned my head slightly, my gaze fixed on her profile bathed in the faint glow of the distant city lights. "You know," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "I used to think that true beauty lay in order, in predictability, in things making perfect sense." I paused, choosing my words carefully, each one layered with the meaning only she could fully grasp. But lately, I've realized there's an entirely different kind of beauty. A transformative kind. It's found in the unexpected, in the chaos, in finding light in places you never thought to look. I let my gaze finally meet hers, pouring all my unspoken feelings into that look. In finding connection in the most surprising of circumstances. Her amber eyes, illuminated by the starlight, held mine. I saw a flicker of understanding, a mirroring of my own vulnerable hope.
She didn't speak.
Her response was not a direct confession, not a verbal declaration that would shatter the exquisite tension of the moment. Instead, it was a gentle leaning closer, a slight, almost imperceptible shift of her body towards mine, closing the small gap between us. It was a silent affirmation, a language spoken without words. In that quiet solitude, under the boundless canvas of the night sky, our hands, which had been resting inches apart on the low stone wall overlooking the city, found each other. It was a brief, soft touch, a feather-light brush of skin that communicated an entire universe of emotion. My fingers interlaced with hers, tentative at first, then firm, a silent promise exchanged in the stillness of the night. It was not a kiss, not a passionate embrace, but an intimate moment of profound connection, an acknowledgement of the emotional journey we had both embarked upon. It was a quiet testament to the courage it took to reach out, to trust, to step beyond the carefully constructed walls we had both built around our hearts, and to find solace in the warmth of another's touch. The world below us hummed with city life, but on that hillside, suspended between earth and stars, it felt like only Aurora and I existed, bound by a fragile, beautiful new beginning. A few weeks later, we found ourselves back in that same sunroom at Meadowbrook where we'd first truly crossed paths. The afternoon light was soft, casting a warm glow over the familiar armchairs and the coffee table that now held a half-finished puzzle Eleanor and Martha had been working on. The two grandmothers had drifted off to take a nap, leaving us alone in the quiet space. We sat side by side on a small sofa, our shoulders touching, as we flipped through a photo album Aurora had brought, pictures of Martha in her art studio, of Aurora as a kid covered in paint, of family gatherings filled with laughter. As we turned to a photo of Aurora holding a tiny kitten, she laughed softly, her head leaning slightly against my shoulder. I turned my head to look at her, and in that moment, Our eyes met. There was no rush, no hesitation this time. Slowly, I leaned in and she met me halfway. It was a gentle kiss, soft and brief, a quiet confirmation of everything we'd been building together. When we pulled back, she smiled, her amber eyes shining, and I knew that this was just the start of something beautiful. The touch on the hillside and that soft kiss in the sunroom were moments that changed everything, yet nothing needed explicit definition. They hung in the air between us like the scent of pine and crisp night air, a silent agreement, a gentle promise. We didn't discuss them at length, but we didn't need to. The connection had deepened, infused with a newfound tenderness and a quiet understanding that transcended words. Our visits to Meadowbrook continued, now imbued with a richer, more meaningful undertone. Eleanor and Martha, ever observant, would often exchange knowing glances when they saw Aurora and me sharing a quiet moment, a small smile playing on their lips. Aurora and I would catch each other's eye across the common room, a shared, warm smile passing between us that spoke volumes. The previous subtle tension had transformed into a comfortable ease, a palpable sense of belonging when we were together. Our conversations, already rich, grew even more so. There was a new layer of intimacy, an implicit trust that allowed us to explore deeper thoughts and feelings without hesitation. Aurora, no longer prone to retracting her vulnerabilities, began to share her dreams with me, her hopes for that pottery studio, her desire to travel to far-flung places, her quiet fears about the future. And I, in turn, found myself more open, more present than I had ever been. The guardedness that had defined so much of my life slowly began to melt away under the gentle warmth of her acceptance. I found myself marveling at the transformation within me. Olivia, the meticulously orderly, the quiet observer, was becoming someone new. The vibrant energy of Aurora, the courage she had instilled in me by simply being herself, had chipped away at my carefully constructed walls. I laughed more easily, spoke my mind with less reservation, and found a lightness in my step that I hadn't realized was missing. It was as if she had helped me discover a color palette within myself that I hadn't known existed. Aurora, too, seemed lighter. The shadows of past burdens that had occasionally flickered in her amber eyes appeared less frequently, replaced by a steady, radiant glow. She spoke less of past hurts and more of future possibilities, her voice imbued with a newfound optimism. My unwavering presence, my quiet strength, seemed to offer her a solace that allowed her to truly breathe. Our journey was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning. There were no grand declarations, no definitive pronouncements about what we were or what we would become. And perhaps that was the most beautiful part of it all. It was an evolving narrative, a testament to how two disparate souls, initially clashing in a quiet hall, could find solace and strength in each other. As I sat with her one afternoon, watching the sun set over the Meadowbrook Gardens, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I reflected on the unexpected path my heart had taken. I had come seeking routine, and instead, I had found a profound connection. I had come seeking quiet, and instead, I had found a vibrant, resonant love. The future remained unwritten, a beautiful blank page, but the possibilities, stretching out before us like the open sky, were vibrant, boundless, and full of promise. We had found a love that continued to unfold, beautiful in its quiet strength, its gentle unfolding, and its boundless potential.